All right. We haven't actually done a review in a little bit, just because we've been working our way through kind of a continuous narrative, working from the Judges into the beginning of Samuel. But let's make sure that we are keeping ourselves up to date on where we are in our timeline. As we go through and just kind of remember where we've been, everything begins where? Creation, right? I mean, it all starts at creation. And so we have creation, and what did God say about his creation when it was complete? It was very good, right? It's not just, he intermittently says it was good, it was good, it was good. Get all the way through. It was very good. And behold, God looked, and it was very good. Then what happens? Yeah? I'm sorry? Okay, then evil came into the world. Yeah, we get to what chapter? Yeah, Genesis 3, and you have the first sin, you have the fall, as we call it. It's just kind of a way to describe it that takes place. The first of the 5 key passages of the Old Testament, and as Olivia states, this is really where now they understand not just what they should or shouldn't do, but now they have the knowledge of what? Good and evil, and they realize evil is what they have done. And so sin enters the world, death through sin, and so we see the spread of sin and death as you continue reading through Genesis, all the way through what narrative that really focuses on sin and especially death? Which one? Okay, the brother kills the other brother. Yes, we're going to move forward quite a little bit, though. We're taking leaps right now. It's not that far, though. What's a story in which you just see worldwide death take place? Yeah, Noah, the flood narrative, in which God, again, remember before God looked and saw that it was very good. Now God looks and sees that what? He saw that the hearts of man were on evil continually. And so you have this language. It's a decreation account. It's supposed to take you back to the creation narrative. So you have the flood that takes place. All of this then leads up to Genesis chapter 12. What happens in Genesis 12? What does God do at this point? All right, the promises to Abraham. From everybody, he now narrows down to a single family. And so he chooses Abraham. Remember before his choices, whether it be Adam or Noah, he narrowed it down to the only person. Now he's narrowing it down to one of many. And so he narrows it down to one family, that of Abraham. And we follow Abraham's line all the way through the rest of Genesis. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then Jacob's sons, and particularly Joseph's story, which remember is kind of Judah's story as well. That leads into their time in what nation as servants? All right, takes them down to their Egyptian bondage, and then God brings them out of that, and we get to Exodus chapter 24. And what happens in Exodus 24? All right, they enter into a covenant with God. Remember, this is where they took the blood, and half the blood they sprinkled on the altar, and the other half, what they sprinkle it on? The people. And in this way, they signed a contract, a covenant with God. So that was number 3 in our key passages of the Old Testament. So he brings them out. Remember, they wander in the wilderness because when God said go, they did not go. And so they said, we'd rather die in the wilderness. And God said, I can arrange that. You can die in the wilderness if that's what you prefer. Your children will enter into the land. And we saw that in Joshua. And the story is Joshua leads them into the land, and they defeat the armies, but they don't take the land. I mean, it's not like the story of Joshua is them now getting in and having the land. They just defeat the armies, and they separate the land for the peoples. But where do we see, in what book are they actually taking the land? All right, that doesn't come until Judges. And it's in Judges that they actually disperse throughout the land in order to claim their places within the land. How well do they do? All right, not well. It's a lot of miserable failure throughout the narratives of the Judges. And so we talked about the Judges cycle, which is kind of like a spiral because it just gets worse and worse and worse the further you go through. Samson being the final of the major judges in the narratives. And then we had this tack-on section at the end that really is all about what phrase? All right, in those days there was no king in Israel, therefore what? What? Okay, excellent. Yeah, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Very good. So Olivia and Joshua both nailed that one. Good job, guys. Yeah, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And remember, in these stories, we have stories that start with the hill country of Ephraim. There was a man from the hill country of Ephraim. Gibeah plays a part, and really especially one of those. Bethlehem plays a part in both of the stories. Jebus plays a part in one of those, which is going to be Jerusalem. Jabesh Gilead also plays a part in one of those. I write all of these down because I want you to tuck these away, because there's a chance, maybe, just maybe, these names are going to pop up again somewhere. In fact, we've already seen that, haven't we? Because when you flip the page, if you're reading through your Jewish Bible, and the Hebrew Bible, not ours, if you flip the page from Judges into Samuel, how does the next story start? There was a man from the hill country of Ephraim. So yeah, right here, right away, you're already trained to think that things are going to run one way, and this one kind of runs counter, because this is whose origin story? All right, this is Samuel's origin story. And what you're going to find is, for really, really important people, a lot of times we get the origin story for these individuals, especially right here during this time frame. So Samuel gets his origin story, and by the time you get through, really through chapter 7, you've seen that now Samuel is serving in what three kind of capacities for the people? All right, he's kind of like a prophet, priest, and king. Now we know king is a modified term. It's accommodative. Why? All right, because in those days, what? There was no king in Israel, right? We're still in that time frame, but he's serving as the judge, leader, king type of a person. So he serves prophet, priest, king. And then you get into chapter 8, and Ryan said they hadn't asked for a king yet. It's in chapter 8 that they finally demand a king. And was it wrong for them to come up and say, we want a king like the other nations? No. It's in the law of Moses, right? Where God says in Deuteronomy chapter 17, hey, when you do this, these are the laws for this. So them asking for a king wasn't the issue. What was the problem, though? What seems to be the problem? Well, what is it that they did while they sought for a king?
They rejected God as their king.
Oh, there you go. Good job, Joshua. Was that Joshua who said that? Yeah. It's not that asking for a king was bad, but they're supposed to ask for a king without rejecting the leadership of God. They had rejected God. And so they were seeking this from a different authority. And that's what God tells Samuel. Is like, look, don't take it personally. Yeah, it really sounds bad, like they're attacking you. And I mean, they kind of are, right? That's how it's played out. But he says, ultimately, I'm the one who's being rejected. But he says, here's the thing, let's give them their king. And I ended with this last week. I just want to kind of make sure to remind us of what's taking place here, because I think there's some significance here. These are the words without vowels, although technically that probably would have that. But the idea, though, that without vowels, these are basically the same things, right? They're supposed to be. Let me say they're supposed to be the same thing. Can you agree on that? All right. Now, I believe if you do that, this becomes what? Anybody remember? He asked. Very good. Yep. This becomes he asked. And I think if you do that, this becomes what? This becomes Saul. And I think that's significant because they asked for a king who would be like what?
All the other nations.
Okay, all the other nations. But when you go up into chapter 12 and you see Samuel with his final address that he's giving as a leader among the people, what does he say about this? What is it that they were scared of, that they wanted a king for? All right, Ammon. They were scared of the king of Ammon. And so that's kind of what it is, it seems, that they were looking for, is a king that is like the king of Ammon. Let me see here. So, chapter 12, and I'm a little ahead of myself, but verse 13, he says, here is the king you've chosen, the one you what? What's that? Desired. This one has requested. Let me see what's over here. I'm not actually looking at the Hebrew itself here. Does someone have asked for? Okay. The one for whom you asked or something like that? Yeah. And I think that's significant because that's kind of what his name is, right? I mean, it's derived from he asked. Here is the one that you asked for, the one that you wanted. That's the one that God has given to you. Now, that should be at least significant. It should raise some thoughts in our mind. He says, this is what you asked for and not what? All right, the one that I am wanting for you. So, verse 12, when you saw that Nahash, king of the Ammonites, was coming against you, you said to me, no, we need a king to reign over us. And so there you see that the fear is for Ammon. And again, I want you to remember Ammon. Kind of tuck that away just a little bit. What they want is a king who can defeat Ammon. All right, everybody caught up now. We're good to continue moving forward as now we are reaching, this, by the way, is one of the most important points in Israelite history. This is a transition point that cannot be understated. Because at this point, they're going to leave this, and they're going to begin to have what? A king. And the king is going to become, as we're going to see, one of the most important aspects of who and what the Messiah is going to be. He is going to be their hope. Everything is going to be all about the kingship of the Messiah. And this is kind of where it all starts, right here at this moment, with Samuel as the king maker. All right, so let's, any questions before we move into Saul's story arc? Questions or comments or anything? All right, let's get into it. Chapter 9, we see Saul, who's anointed as king. And there are going to be times in which I'm going to point something out, maybe ask a question, maybe make a comparison to something that we haven't talked about yet. That's just going to happen from time to time because you are supposed to see connections, contrasts, things that are one way with Saul and another way with someone who's coming up after Saul. Anybody know who that someone who's coming up after Saul might be? Yeah, you're supposed to start seeing things that we have the benefit of having read through this before, and the more you read through these and go over them again and again, the more that you start to notice these little subtle differences between Saul and David. So, this one's a little easier to hold. 1 Samuel chapter 9. All right. There was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, son of Zeror, son of Bechorat, son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a man of wealth. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a handsome young man. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he. From his shoulders upward, he was taller than any of the people. So as we begin looking at Saul, what is the stress on the description? What's that? His appearance. And that he stands, head and shoulders above everyone else. What we see from this, he looks the part. If we're wanting a king like Nahash and these other kings, this is the guy right here. You know, everyone else, when they come into his presence, they have to look up, just physically. They have to look up to Saul, which immediately puts him into a superior position over them, is kind of the idea. That's why you want a king such as this who is foreboding in a certain way. He looks the part. They're like, yes, this is the guy that we want. Now, verse 3, the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. So Kish said to Saul his son, take one of the young men with you and go look for the donkeys. And he passed through where? The hill country of Ephraim. Oh, hey, that just popped up again. Look at that. Once again, we're tying narratives. We're tying stories together with little details. Passed through the land of Shalishah, but they did not find them. Passed through the land of Sha'alim. They were not there. They passed through the land of Benjamin. Did not find them. And when they came to Zuph, Saul said to his servant, what? What did he tell his servant? Okay.
Better go back. They're going to start worrying about us.
All right. So let's just take stock of what it is that Saul is doing. What's he looking for? Donkeys, yes. Go a little deeper. What's he looking for? Maybe a little more general. I don't know. Getting a lot of quizzical looks here. This is more than just donkeys. Whose donkeys are they? Or, yeah, his. What were you going to say, Dale?
That's what I was going to say. They were his dad's donkeys.
Okay. All right. So this is livestock that belongs to his father that has gone missing. And what is Saul's attitude towards them? Oh, well, we can let them wander off, and whatever happens to them, happens to them. We should go back to my father. All right? Everybody got that in place? When you think of Saul and Saul's attitude towards the donkeys, towards the livestock that is under him, it said, oh, well, whatever happens, happens. Everybody kind of got that? Are you already thinking of a connection with maybe somebody else and the way that he treats his livestock that could potentially go missing? Anything in your minds that show a difference between one person and another? Right? You're starting to see these connections, I hope. Remember what did David tell Saul when he was standing before him and he wanted to go fight the giant? What did he say? What did David say? There was a lion that came and tried to take a sheep. There was a bear that came and took the sheep. And did he say, oh, well, what happens, happens? No. He went after what was lost, even at the cost of beating down a lion and beating down a bear with his bare hands. Right? Not literal, with his fist. Yeah. All right? Yeah. Can you see, these are the differences I think that we're supposed to start picking up on. This is his attitude compared to David's attitude. All right. Moving forward from here, they say, well, let's go and let's find the seer. Verse 9, you have a little note right here, and I'm just going to bring this up just to reinforce what we've talked about before. Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he said, let us go to the seer, for today's prophet was formerly known as a seer. What does that tell us? What's that little parenthetical note tell us? All right, this is being written by someone later, or maybe this is somebody who's adding an explanatory note after the case, further saying, back in the time when this story first began to be spread and everything else, I just want you to understand and realize they called prophets seers. I don't want you to be confused when you hear the word seer and when that's talked about, because that just means prophet for us today. So in other words, this is a little bit of information that may not have been part of the original story as it was transmitted, written, handed down. Is that a problem? That somebody added to, perhaps, the story? No, it really shouldn't be, because what we are reading is a finished product that has gone through people who have looked at it after the fact, have updated it, have made necessary changes, added in various notes. The final product that we have is something that, has been through some editors, and those are part of the inspiration work of God. It's not an issue at all, but it could be for some people if you don't just think of it in that way. And then you do have to wonder, well, how did Moses write about his own death? I think this is where we brought this conversation up before. Or who adds little notes like this? Or this is the way that it's been done to this day. Well, who's the one who says to this day? So, all of that to say that it is important that we understand that we are reading a finished product. Is what we have. All right. So, they go to the seer. Who is the seer, by the way? Samuel. Yeah, the seer, the prophet that's under discussion is Samuel. All right. So, I'm good to erase this. We're good here. Everybody's got this. All right. I'm going to suggest that the kingship, as far as the way it was meant to be done initially, has, that is, bringing in a king, has 3 stages. It's supposed to. One is an official anointing. What's really annoying is that I remember at one point I had these three with, I had alliteration. I think they were all D words, like they all began with, I can't remember what they were. So you're getting the non-alliterative ones, and I'll remember later. But the first thing, there would be an annoying, followed by a demonstration. And then the final one would be the coronation. Maybe if one of you guys wanted to come up with a B word for demonstration, then I would have the ABCs of kingship or something like that. That would, that'll preach well. Besides demonstration, something that starts with a B. So I'll put you thesauruses on that one. But these are the three parts. First of all, you're supposed to have a private anointing type of a ceremony. It's not public. Nobody else knows about it. You just simply have the prophet who comes to the king and gives an anointing. This is followed then by a demonstration of this individual, a demonstration of his kingship, of his leadership, some way to prove that God is with this person so that everybody can rally behind him. And then following that, there would be an obvious coronation. Of course, this person would be king. Who else would be king except for the one who has demonstrated his kingship, that the Spirit of the Lord is with him? Does that make sense? This, I believe, is supposed to be the way that this happens, which is why when you get into chapter 10, how does chapter 10 begin? Now that Saul has come to Samuel and they've connected, how does this begin? What does Samuel do? Yeah, you have this in chapter 10, right? Right there, at the very beginning, Samuel took a flask of oil, poured it on his head, kissed him, and said, "Has not the Lord anointed you to be prince over his people Israel? And you shall reign over the people of the Lord, and you will save them from the hand of their surrounding enemies, and this will be a sign to you, the Lord has anointed you to be prince over his heritage." And then he gives just this crazy list of things after this. I mean, you just read through this list and you're like, this, then this, then this, then this, and you're like, what even is happening here? I mean, he says, look, when you leave, here's the sign. When you leave, verse 2, when you depart, you will meet two men by Rachel's tomb in the territory of Benjamin at Belzah, and they will say, the donkeys that you went to seek are found. Now your father has ceased to care about the donkeys and is anxious about you, saying, what shall I do about my son? Then, after that, you shall go on from there farther, come to the oak of Tabor. 3 men going up to God at Bethel will meet you there, one carrying 3 young goats, another carrying 3 loaves of bread, another carrying a skin of wine. They will greet you and will give you 2 loaves of bread, which you will accept from their hand. After that, you will come to Gibeath Elohim, and there, where there is a garrison of the Philistines. And as soon as you come to the city, you will meet a group of prophets coming down from the high place with harp, tambourine, flute, lyre before them prophesying, and the Spirit of the Lord will rush upon you, and you will prophesy with them and be turned into another man. Now, when these signs meet you, do what your hand finds to do, for God is with you. Then go down before me to Gilgal, and behold, I am coming down to you to offer burnt offerings, to sacrifice peace offerings. You will wait 7 days until I come to you and show you what you shall do. All right, isn't that just kind of a crazy list of, hey, this is going to happen, this many people are going to come, they're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then this will happen, and how do you think it went? How many of you believe that every one of those things happened? Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Now, here's the thing. At the ending point of this, where is he going to be? Okay, well, yes, then go to Gilgal. Before he says to go to Gilgal, though, where is he? Where is he? Where is he when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him and he prophesies? What's that? Well, verse 5, after that you will come to where? All right, Gibeah, Elohim. Do y'all have something different besides that? The hill of God. Okay, so they translated that for you. All right, so the hill of God. All right, I wonder what the CSB does with that. Let's see, the Spirit of the Lord. You want me to group prophets? All right, here. Well, okay, this says Gibeah of God. Huh, that's interesting. All right. Anyway, whatever place, the hill of God, Gibeah, Elohim, the Gibeah of God, whatever the case is, this is his ending point where he's told then to do what? Not wait 7 days yet. What's he told to do? All right, do what the occasion requires. What translation do you have there, Lorraine? All right, New American Standard. Do what the occasion requires. That sounds like the CSB. Do what the circumstances require. Anybody else have anything different? Do what the occasion demands. All right, very good. Kathy, what do you have? All right, do what your hand finds to do. Do whatever your hand finds to do or hands find to do. In other words, when he's finished with all of this prophesying, as he's here at Gibeah, he is supposed to do something. The occasion requires something. Some kind of action is supposed to take place, after which he's then supposed to go to Gilgal, and then what, Sean? And then he's supposed to wait 7 days for Samuel to arrive. The question is, what are his hands supposed to find to do? What does the occasion require or demand? Because that's a weird phrase, isn't it, right there? What do you think? What does this occasion require? Let me ask this. What else is at Gibeah Elohim, or the hill of God? A garrison of Philistines. Is it possible that he is supposed to do something, that the situation requires that he is to do something about this garrison of Philistines? That seems to be the most logical scenario here, is that he is being told that when all of this takes place, you're going to be right here beside a garrison of Philistines, and when you do something about the garrison of Philistines. Take them down. Take them out. And after you've taken out the garrison, then you're supposed to do what? Go to Gilgal, and in 7 days' time, I'm going to come, and we're going to work things out from there. Why? What's going to happen after 7 days? What's going to happen after he goes in and wipes out a garrison of Philistines? What's that going to do? Okay, Okay, so that in and of itself could be seen as a demonstration that the Spirit of the Lord is with him, that God's with him, right? But what else does it do? Yeah, Kelly?
It's a great way to start a war.
Isn't it? You wipe out their garrison, they find out, and they're coming with their armies. And he says, yeah, you wait for 7 days, and as the Philistines are gathering together to come up against you in war, I will come after a 7-day period of time, and I will do what's necessary. By the way, does that ever happen in Saul's life? Where he waits as the Philistines are encroaching, and he's supposed to wait for 7 days? Does that sound familiar to anybody else? No? Okay. Yeah. Doesn't this sound exactly like what takes place in 1 Samuel chapter 13? Remember in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 8, Saul waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to where? Gilgal. So he's at Gilgal, surrounded by the army, waiting 7 days for Samuel. Where did Samuel ever tell him to wait 7 days? This is the only place that we have it, is back in chapter 10. By the way, just other things, what is it that actually prompts this? That actually starts this war? At the beginning of chapter 13, what is it? Verse 3, what starts the war? The garrison of Philistines at Geba is destroyed and overthrown. When that happens, that starts a 7-day clock, time clock, right? And at that point, 7 days later is when Samuel arrives, just like he said in chapter 10. What's the problem? Saul, yeah, just like Sean just said, it was not Saul who defeated the Philistines, or that took down the garrison. It was his son. If you go back to chapter 10, this is the moment that Samuel is telling Saul, hey, this is your moment. This is your time right here, right now. Take out the Philistine garrison, come back here, and lead the people against the Philistines in battle at Gilgal, and everyone's going to rally behind you, and there will be a great coronation, and it's going to be definitive right here from the start. Saul is our king. That's what happened, right? Is that how it all went down? No. Because Samuel said, do what your hand finds to do. And at the end of all of this, in verse 13, going back chapter 10, verse 13. Chapter 10, verse 13. What did Saul's hand find to do? Yeah. Nothing. What did the moment require for Saul? Nothing. He does nothing. He is anointed by Samuel. He is set up to demonstrate who and what he is. And instead, when he comes right down to it, verse 13, when he had finished prophesying, he came to the high place. And verse 14, Saul's uncle said to him and to his servant, hey, where'd you go? He said, to seek the donkeys. When we saw they were not to be found, we went to Samuel. Saul's uncle said, please tell me what Samuel said to you. Verse 16, what's Saul's response? He said, oh, Samuel just told us that the donkeys were found. That's what Samuel told me. Was there anything else, by the way, that Samuel told him? About going to this place, talking to these people, getting bread, doing this, going that, prophesying. By the way, he did prophesy and demonstrated himself in such everything. All of this comes about, and he comes back, and his uncle's like, "Oh, well, what did Samuel say?" And he said, "Oh, he told me the donkeys were found." What's he doing? What does that demonstrate about who and what Saul is? That's the way he answers this question. What's that, Joshua? Ooh, cowering? Is that what you said? Yeah. I think you're going to find coward is a pretty good description, especially here in the beginning for Saul. And very in particular, it has to do with his place as king. Now, this is kind of contrary to the way that I looked at Saul, thought about Saul for a very long time. And I think where a lot of people think about Saul, that we look at the fact that Saul seems to not want to take the kingship. What kind of light is that often portrayed in? Humility. Look at this guy. This is the kind of guy you do want. You want to put leadership on the shoulders of those who understand just how big leadership is. You know, it's the ones who don't want to wear the mantle that probably should be wearing it, right? I mean, that's a lot of times the way that is. It's important for us to see that our 21st century perspective of humility, honor, and importance is kind of irrelevant to this story. Because this story is setting up two different people that are supposed to be compared to each other. When Saul is faced with his destiny, what does he do? He runs away from it. And by the way, if you don't buy that, I don't think we're going to get to it tonight, but this becomes even more clear in the next part of his story. But that's the way this is being set up. We're not supposed to look at this in a positive, hey, look at Saul, the humble man. That is a great character trait. What we are seeing is look at Saul, someone who is told to stand up and do what he's supposed to do for God and for Israel, and he refuses to do it. That is the picture of Saul that's being painted. So, got a few minutes. What does this do to this? Did he do this? No, he didn't. We've messed this all up now. There is no demonstration that's being given by which everyone is going to now come behind him and say, you are clearly our leader, let's venture forth together. So now they move straight into what? A coronation. And they can't do a coronation with everybody saying, well, duh, of course we know who the guy's going to be. So they have to do what instead? They have to choose the first king of Israel. The guy that they say, we want a king like the other nations around us. And they don't just rally behind a guy and say, yes, clearly, this is our man. Look what he's done for us. He is our leader. We can get behind him. No, they have to pull names out of a hat or whatever the casting of lots is in particular. They have to do this in order to find it. And I said we wouldn't get to it. I'm going to throw it in anyway. When they cast lots and they get to Saul, where is he? All right. Josie said he's hiding. I think it's very important, though, that we recognize where is he hiding. Chapter 10, verse 22. They inquired again of the Lord, is there a man still to come? The Lord said, behold, he has hidden himself among the baggage. When the time came for him to stand up and take his place as the king, he goes away from that to the baggage. Interestingly enough, the next time the word baggage shows up, who do you think's story it shows up in? It shows up in David's story in chapter 17. What's going on in 1 Samuel chapter 17? What's that? Yeah, David and Goliath. And so you have the story right here, David and Goliath, where David's come to the camp, and now the great giant has come out at this point. And you have all of this, and we'll talk more about this when we get to chapter 17. I'm not going to, get into a lot of it. There's so much cool stuff going on, though, in this story, in this narrative. But I want you to see this. Verse 21, Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. Verse 22, the word baggage shows up again. What does it say? What did David do? He left the baggage to go to the front lines. When it comes time for Saul to have his great moment, to even be coronated, he goes to the baggage to hide. And yet, when you get to the next use of the word baggage, it is David who leaves the baggage to go to the front line. And then ultimately, when Goliath comes out, this becomes this for David, right? So you see, it's the comparison of these two. This is what I'm trying to point out. We're not supposed to look at Saul in some kind of way of saying, well, this is a positive character trait. He's a humble guy. We want humble people to be leaders. That's not the way that these stories are being presented. These two are in direct comparison, and there's a comparison point of baggage. Interestingly enough, just that one word baggage right here, where one runs to the baggage instead of taking what he's supposed to do. The other one runs from the baggage and hits it head on. Saul is the king they asked for. He's not the king they need. David is the one that God truly desires to give them. All right, any questions or comments on that? Yes, Jen. Yeah, that's excellent, by the way, that you caught that. Jan just mentioned, we have a mentioning of Rachel's tomb, don't we? And, and we have that whole narrative that goes along with Rachel's tomb and all of the story, which, by the way, Rachel is ultimately whose mother? Okay, Joseph and Benjamin, specifically Benjamin, who's from the tribe of Benjamin? Saul, right? This is a connection type of a story, and you see some of the failings. The one who's loved ends up least at the end. You can weave some of these things. I love that, Jan. I love that you picked up on that, and then you can start to see some of those connections. You had a second? Yes. Yeah, Jan said sometimes we picture Saul because his father's sending him out to find the donkeys as a young man himself. He has his own son who is old enough to go into battle and battle the garrison of the Philistines, right? So, it is important to kind of keep some of that in perspective. Very good. Thank you. Yeah, John.
Something happened with David later on with Samuel where he was anointed the same way.
Yep.
The oil was put on his head. It said the Spirit of God came upon David, which did not happen to Saul in chapter 10. And in fact, you kind of passed over, I don't know if you did it on purpose, but Samuel said, it's not what God wanted, but you're anointed. And then it says later on, when David had a chance to kill Saul, after Saul had been chasing him, Jason said, how can you put the hand on the anointed of God? He still considered David, in all that time, considered Saul to be the appointed of God, even though it wasn't God's choosing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Which is another paradox.
Yeah, and we'll definitely see some. Well, we won't spend too much time on that. I will say, though, the Spirit of the Lord departs from Saul at some point. So for the Spirit of the Lord to depart from him, that means that it had come upon him at some point.
The Spirit of the Lord was on David, but never said that on Saul. Is that in verse 6?
Verse 10.
10. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm not looking specifically. But the idea, though, but that's a really good comparison point between Saul and David, is that when it departs him, and then the Spirit of the Lord comes upon David. So very good. All right, we're out of time. So thanks a lot, guys. Really good participation, discussion points. And, maybe you guys aren't as excited as I am, but I think this section is like just crazy good. I love all of the things that you find in the beginning of 1 Samuel. So looking forward to continuing this next week.